Go Math Lesson 3.6. So now we looked in 3.5 at what an absolute value was, and today we're going to be comparing absolute values. Again, this becomes a little tricky because you have to realize when you're discussing absolute values, they're always expressed as a positive number. So if I'm looking at negative 30 and 32, which one is bigger? Well, obviously positive 32 is bigger than negative 30. That's a given, right? Any positive number is bigger than negative. So comparing those two, it's no difficult task. But if I change them to absolute value, I'm asking then the distance from 0. Negative 30 then becomes expressed as 30 units from 0, and 32 is expressed as positive 32. So both of these numbers are expressed now in a positive way because it's the distance to 0. Now my answer doesn't change. Positive 32 is still greater than positive 30, but these two numbers are much, much closer in their value. Where this comes as an inequality is I can express any number of things and just realize that I have to, when I'm looking at absolute value, I have to express them as a positive. So, let's take for example, on Monday, Allie's bank account balance was negative $24. On Tuesday, her account balance was less than it was on Monday. Use absolute value to describe Allie's bank account on Tuesday as a debt. Now, if I were looking on a number line, and again, this sometimes helps, let's just make myself a little reminder number line. So, on Monday, it was negative $24. Well, negative 24 is between negative 20 and negative 30, so that's like right here. This is Monday. Negative 24. On Tuesday, her account balance was less than it was on Monday. So what's less than negative 24? Well, let's say, for example, negative 30. She's having a bad week, right? So negative 30 is less than negative 24. So when we're referring to debt or something like that in a bank account, they never actually subtract. They always add a negative. So we're talking about it as a debt or a bill. We can still use the positive sense of the word because we're talking about absolute value. So in this situation, negative 24 represents a debt of $24. Now it's the absolute value, it's the distance to 0. So we're $24 away from 0. So if we were talking about Tuesday as a debt, it would be a debt bigger than $24. Okay, it's a debt that's bigger than $24. So it's already telling us with debt that it's a negative number. But that $24 is expressed as an absolute value because it's the distance to 0. So we don't say a debt of a negative $24. That's doubling up on our negative negatives, right? But when we're describing debt or distance from 0, we're talking about absolute value. So it's written as a debt bigger than $24. That doesn't mean she has more than $24. That means that her debt, her distance from 0, is bigger than $24. So this is really a lesson where you have to stop and ask yourself, what am I trying to describe? And am I being successful in understanding the problem? I like, when working with positive and negative integers, to make myself a number line and just play the whole thing out in my head so that I know what I'm talking about. Again, when I'm seeing it like this, and I'm saying, ah yes, her debt is getting bigger, even though the number in her bank account is getting smaller, the debt is getting bigger. So I'm describing it as a debt with absolute value. It's a debt bigger than $24.